Hi, Glenn.
Hi, Renee.
Hi. Well, thanks for joining me here on the podcast. I'm excited to dive in. I love what your book is about, and I'm excited to kind of hear more and share with my audience a little bit about what led you here. So, do you want to give us a quick recap of who you are, what you're currently doing, and a little about your book?
Sure, thanks. I'm excited to be on the podcast. I'm a retired civil engineer. Had a whole career in engineering, working private, public sector, my own companies, working for other people. Um, and I got into backpacking. My first big adventure was in 1976. I graduated high school in Western Massachusetts, and then rode my bicycle 4,200 miles across the country, get back to the West Coast where I was born and had grown up to the fourth grade. So that was my first big adventure. And then life kind of got busy, with college, getting married, having kids, building a career, not necessarily in that order. Um, and it wasn't until our oldest son, Brian, got into Boy Scouts that I kind of got back into the outdoors. And this was about the time of the resurgence of kind of the ultralight movement in backpacking. And so a buddy of mine read Ray Jardine's early book and got to talking about lightening our pack weights. And he decided to section hike the Pacific Crest Trail at that time. So I did a lot of those hikes with him. And since my mom thought every kid should leave home knowing how to cook, bake, and sew, I started sewing my own gear. And one thing led to another. I accidentally started a gear company along the way, Gossamer Gear. And now I'm retired, live in Bend, and people have been bugging me to write a book probably for about 10 years now. So I finally caved and wrote the book. And there's one lesson in there that kind of dives into the gear. But the focus of the book is, as through the years, the roughly 50 years now, I've been working on lightening my pack weight. I realized there were a lot of those lessons from both lightening my load and spending time in outdoors that applied to the rest of life. And so most of the book is kind of the application of those lessons that I learned to the rest of life.
I I love that. Um, And that's kind of funny that you say that because this is something I share a lot about in on the podcast. Obviously I started my blog centered around our minimalist journey and kind of living with less. But I struggled so much when it came to creating a podcast around it or social media because in the space as being a female, I felt like it has to be like the organization of our pantries and how to fold your clothes so that you have more space. And I kept telling myself like I don't want to talk on that. I don't want to build a whole thing around, you know, less stuff or minimalism focus. I wanted to do more about the letting go of, what happens when we live with less and not just less physically, but when we kind of learn to let go of a lot of things in life and travel light. So I would imagine maybe we have some overlapping thoughts on those things, and I'm excited to dive in and hear. But it also makes me laugh. You said that you accidentally started a gear company.
Yeah, that's I never meant to. I mean, Gossamer Gear is a going concern now. I've never received a salary from the company. I never started to make any money. I just wanted to allow other people to get into the backcountry with lighter gear. Um, and so I made my pack, and it was early internet days, and I put the plans. I if you're an engineer, it's never good enough. So I'm always, I made a pack, and then I thought, well, I could improve it. Anyway, the fourth pack I made, I thought, I like the way this has turned out. So I put the plans on the internet so anyone could make it for free. But I kept getting calls from people saying, hey, um, can you make one for me? And I'm working 70, 80 hours a week engineering at this point. So I was like, no, that's an easy answer. That's a hard no. But I kept getting calls. And so I thought, well, I felt bad for people. I should see if I could get a couple made for them. So I was talking to the ladies in Florida that I got my material from, and they said, well, there's this trade magazine and there's this place in Seattle that's at least on your coast, since I was living in San Diego area at this time. So I called up Monty and explained to him what I wanted to do. I sent him up some packs. He says, oh, yeah, no problem. We've made packs before, backpacks. And after a couple go rounds, he he explained to me. I remember distinctly the phone call. He said, "These not like other packs we've made." I said, "Well, that's kind of the point. They're
Right.
different. They're a lot lighter. Instead of weighing 7 pounds, they weigh 1 pound." Um, and I wanted to get 25 made. I figured then everyone who wanted one would have one, and I could go back to doing my engineering. And Monty said our minimum order is 100. And so we went back and forth and finally got them down to 50. And I figured, that'd be in my garage for the next 5 or 10 years. I'll eventually get rid of them. No big deal. So our son Brian put together a rudimentary website that would, like, people could fill out an order form and it would send me an email. And suddenly, like, I got an email. Someone had placed an order. And so I grabbed a yellow pad of lined paper and wrote it down. I still have, in fact, the pictures are in the book of that yellow line pad. And before I even got the first pack made, I had 86 orders. So that was my first indication that, okay, this is not going to turn out quite like I thought. So it,
Oh, wow.
it went from
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
So you really do mean accidentally.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's so cool. I think sometimes um I tend to be someone who feels like there has to be a step-by-step laid out plan. But I think a lot of times just listening to those little, oh, some people want these. Oh, sure, I'll make, just listening to those little nudges can really
Yes.
lead to amazing things.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I like to see the whole plan, all the steps laid out, but sometimes all you need to know is like the next step
Yeah.
and do that.
Oh, I love that. And so I also kind of related in the sense that you said you took a break from outdoors with, you started life, right? Like family and your career and things like that. And you kind of took a pause from backpacking. Was that what you were saying?
Yeah, really didn't. I was on one podcast and someone asked, like, well, has this been the outside been a theme your whole life, something you've always done? And they said, when you moved to San Diego, you must have gotten into all the outdoor opportunities there. It's like, no, not really. I was, focused on career and
So you kind of found your way back to backpacking. I I asked because that kind of sounds similar and maybe a smaller gap, but I fell into mom life and raising my kids. And one day my husband and I decided to take our kids up to the North Shore, Minnesota is where we are. And I said, let's go to Gooseberry Falls, which is a waterfall that we have near us. That's where my dad used to take me when I was little. And I watched my daughter kind of scaling the rocks. And I had this thought like inside that was kind of like me recognizing myself in her. I was like, oh gosh, I forgot I love this stuff. This is where I want to be. And so we started intentionally getting outdoors more with them. So like you said in our my parents' interview, we have a photo outdoors. We've really started to fall completely in love with everything outside.
yeah. Have you read The Comfort Crisis?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I'm just like halfway through it, but so many lessons there. And I think there's crossover with kind of minimalism. And some of the main themes are the value of being outside, which you obviously know. And they talk about kind of like a outside pyramid, kind of like the food pyramid, where the bottom layer is, 20 minutes outside 3 days a week. It is kind of the bare minimum that you get some benefits with reducing the cortisol levels in your body and your blood pressure and all that good stuff. Um, and then the the next level is kind of the 3 day rule, 3 days in the wilderness, which is just unplugged. And it just takes 3 days until you stop kind of worrying about all the things you do in your normal life and you're just there in the outside. And then the peak is like a peak experience where you have, a 50-50 chance of failing. It's something that's, you're not sure you can do, kind of beyond your capabilities, outside, kind of an endurance, kind of like riding your bicycle across the country. Um, but yeah, just super intriguing. And also, you mentioned your daughter climbing the waterfall. It talks about, you know, helicopter parenting and not allowing kids to develop like a risk assessment because they don't have, some parents don't let their kids like play outside. I mean, I remember growing up outside just as a kid. I was lucky enough to be born before the internet, and my mom thought TVs were terrible. So like we never had a TV. She says, if you're bored, read a book. Well, she had a rule, and there's a fascinating thing on boredom in the book, The Comfort Crisis. But she had a rule: if you ever told her you were bored, you had to do what she gave you to do. And so I only remember telling her I was bored once because I ended up spending the rest of the day turning over her vegetable garden.
Oh no.
Well, after that, it was like, if I was bored, I found something to do
Yeah.
myself because I did not want to tell my mom I was bored.
Oh,
Um,
I love that.
but just letting kids be wild and grow up wild and fall and scrape themselves, and so they learn like, oh yeah, don't get off a bicycle when it's moving at high speed, or no, I can't jump something that high, or whatever the case may be. But they develop a risk assessment instead of just assuming life is and the outside is a scary, dangerous place and you shouldn't be there.
Yeah, that's something I really had to work at. I think as a mom, you kind of go into that like the protective instinct.
Yeah.
It's strong. And my husband struggles with anxiety, so he was very much like you know, uh nervous about a lot of the potential things for them too. But I started kind of telling them like my mantra or some things, what I would say to them is like, pay attention to your own comfort zone. Like do what you feel like you're capable of and don't put, you don't have to push yourself further. You don't need to compete with your sister or your brother, just if you feel comfortable climbing that you do. If you start to feel a little leery and like maybe it's not safe, then you need to, work on not doing that thing or not climbing that thing. Um, it's not always easy, but I feel like especially trying to start that at a young age kind of gives them not just in nature and playing in nature, but in life, like trusting themselves more, um, and not always stepping away from something that feels like a challenge necessarily.
Yeah, that's the other thing is like, okay, if you know you're at your limit, it's like that's good. Recognize that. And then is it safe to push it a little bit? Can you survive it? Basically, it's like don't die is the number one rule. My dad always had a saying, which seems like a typical dad saying, is kids don't rust. It's like, yeah, you know, they'll survive. Kids don't rust. Let them run around in the rain with no jackets. Like, yeah, they don't rust.
I like that. Oh, and that's because it reminds me of my grandma. I recently had this just a moment where I challenged my own comfort zone that I didn't know I had. And that was going outside in Minnesota winter with my ankles showing. Like I
Ooh.
just had leggings on and I just had, a little bit of my ankle showing between my shoe and my pant leg. But I think there was that parent, if my grandma voiced inside my like, oh, none of your skin should ever be exposed to to the elements, like I was going to immediately become ill and keel over and die. But I kind of even just stepping outside for myself, going, and I'm gonna survive my trip to Target with my ankle showing. And it sounds so silly, but those things stick with us.
No, yeah, it's those little things, those little boundaries that we don't even realize and
Right.
test. Yeah, and test for ourselves. Like, yeah, no, ankles. Like, we have a mailman. We live in Bend, Oregon. Our mailman, Steve, I think he's from Australia, New Zealand, but he is in shorts 365 days a year. The other day it was sleeting. I mean, it was snow mixed with freezing rain. He was in shorts. It's just, you have to admire someone that just completely oblivious to the weather. It's like, I don't care. I wear shorts. That's who I am. That's what I do. And that's what he does.
Yeah, it's so funny. I'm not that person. I don't think I'm quite there. But um I've noticed in my husband's family, his brother was this way and our oldest daughter was this way, where they kind of lean into the weather, I feel like so when it's colder out, they're like, well, I guess I'll just be cold and no jacket and I'll put shorts on and it'd be 90-degree weather and our daughter would be out in like full pants and a sweatshirt. And we're like, what? It just, but I think your natural instinct is to be like, what are you doing? But that was even part of it's just such a mini little process of me saying like, okay, well, I'm gonna trust that you're okay in a hoodie and playing outside in the sunshine, or maybe not necessarily letting her head off to school without a jacket and shorts, but um, you
Yeah, but
can't help but wonder. I wonder why some
that's how
people
they
tend to do that.
that's how they learn their limits. I mean, in backpacking, um, I have a down sleeping bag because that's the lightest option. So of course that's what I have. But they always say, when you have down, you have to make sure it doesn't get wet because when it's wet, it just clumps and
Yeah.
it's and you die is basically the way the story goes. Well, I was in the Beartooths once and we'd been snowed on. We were camping in tarps on snow. And my sleeping bag was completely, it didn't get a chance to dry out during the day because the sun wasn't out. It was snowing all day. So that night, I set up my little tarp, skinny in. I got my headlamp on and I'm in my bag and I look down my body and it's just clumps of dark down. And I thought, this is going to be a very, very cold night. I mean, I did what I could. I ate some nut butter to try and fuel my body with some long burning fuels. And then I woke up sometime during the night and turned my headlamp on and my bag was all fluffy because the heat from my body had dried out and fluffed out the down. Now, if I can, my strong preference is to make sure my down bag doesn't get wet. But having survived that particular case, it gives me a different perspective on it. It's like, okay, well, if it does get wet, I'm probably not going to die. It might be an uncomfortable night, but I know at least that one time it fluffed itself up because I had fueled my body enough to generate enough heat to dry it out. So,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And it's kind of strange. This happens to me a lot where I have someone I talked with before you and talking with you now, literally that same concept of when I get through something, I'll survive it. You go through something that you think you shouldn't, um, or that you think will be dangerous or you think will be bad. And if you can kind of just talk yourself through it, um, or survive that thing, you realize you can survive that thing, which is
yeah,
a huge
I
life
think you'd
lesson.
enjoy the comfort crisis because he talks a lot about how, we're killing ourselves with the comfort because we lose the resilience. And they had fascinating experiments in there. They brought a bunch of people in and gave them a questionnaire to ask them, kind of what hardships they'd endured. Have you been through earthquakes and fires and deaths in the family and stuff like that? So they could assess people kind of what they had endured. And then they ran experiments like uh, holding your hand in ice water. And the people who had had a harder life were able to hold them in there longer than people who had had a more sheltered, comfortable life. And we're so driven to provide those comforts. But the premise of this book is like we would do well to at least have periods where we are uncomfortable because that's what builds resilience. And, people that endure hardships, less prescription painkillers, more likely to be happy, to assess their life as okay, less likely to have health issues or mental health issues. So, yeah, we love to be comfortable, and that's one of the things I like about backpacking with very lightweight is, you have to be okay with being less comfortable.
Right. That's what it's funny that you say that because I think I've seen that play out so much in my life. Um, I'll have certain friends who have maybe gone through similar hardships that I have. And they'll say this friend doesn't get it. And I was like, I kind of not in the nicest way say this friend kind of just coasted through a lot of things. Um, But that's interesting that you say that because I was going to ask, it's easy to hear that I think where we hear that people who've had a tougher life or who've gone through or overcome difficult things, have better health, better mental health. Okay, well, what are we supposed to force ourselves to do something awful? But I was reading a book, Dopamine Nation, which talks about, people who overcome their addictions and things like that by finding difficult things to do, like climbing a mountain, like going hiking, like doing something that pushes you um in a good way. It's a healing thing. So I think we have those opportunities to push ourselves. It's not necessarily the loss of a person or survival instincts, but challenging our physical and mental capabilities.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said physical and mental because I mean, I think we focus maybe on the physical, running a marathon or doing a week-long backpacking trip or climbing a mountain or something like that. But giving a TED talk or starting a podcast or something can be equally scary and insurmountable and hard, very hard things that you can push yourself writing a book, that you can make yourself do and you come out the other side a better person.
Right. And I was just sharing that my niece came over last night to visit and we were talking about, she's like, "Oh my gosh, you've done so much," like, so I like that you say starting a podcast because made me feel like I did do something that this was hard starting it, that kind of thing, or trying to find the right things to say. And I told her sometimes it's, last week I had to cancel our talk because I was coughing so hard I could hardly speak. Um, but I still later in the week had to get an episode out that would go live last Monday. And I told her, I'm like, if you ever feel like you can't do something, go listen to that. I said, I don't know what I'm talking about. I just kind of showed up and said whatever I could ramble out. It probably sounds like this. It's sometimes it's showing up and just knowing like we're not going to be perfect at it every time.
Yeah. I like, what's that quote? Like 98% of life is showing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where have you kind of gone, or I guess how did you fall back into backpacking and outdoors?
Well, it was through our oldest son, Brian,
Oh,
crossed
right.
over into
Yeah.
Boy Scouts. And we joined a very active troop in Oceanside, California. And the troop had a number of backpacking trips, including the capstone trip was a week in the High Sierra. We had like week-long river rafting and summer camp. So it was a super active troop. And my friend Reed Miller, who I actually dedicated the book to, who I hiked a lot of the Pacific Crest Trail with, um, he was the scoutmaster. And so I became an adult scoutmaster leader at the troop and ended up in charge of the backpacking program. So that was kind of between the scouts and then Reed deciding he was going to section hike the Pacific Crest Trail and me hiking a bunch of that with him. That was kind of what got me back into the outdoors.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. How long is the Pacific Coast Trail?
Pacific Crest Trail.
Pacific Crest Trail. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a common misnomer. Pacific Crest Trail is 2,750 miles last I checked. Now I know they're working on some reroutes, but last I knew, that's kind of the more or less official. It kind of changes year to year when sections are, as if you're through hiking it because sections are closed due to fire, landslide, or whatever. So,
Oh, yeah. We
but it's
made
a
our
long
way.
ways.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I'll have to look that up. My husband and I absolutely love hiking. Our kids, not so much all the time. I think as they've gotten older, they kind of um burn out on it. So we try to find that balance of where we do a longer hike and then we have a day of just fun and relaxation where my husband's very much the kind of guy who's like, let's just keep going. Okay, like we just did an entire, 5 miles. Let's go find another 4 mile hike. And my kid's like, oh God, Dad, stop. Um, but I think he and I would love to try to find more of those options. Um, so I'll have to look into that.
Yeah,
But
and
then,
you never know. You never
go
know. The
ahead.
kids may come back to it too. I
I
mean,
hope so.
yeah, and some might not. I mean, our youngest Grant, he's a city boy. I mean, he moved from San Diego to East LA because he thought San Diego was too provincial. So, I
Oh,
mean, he just likes to be in the thick of things, big city stuff. So, I've hiked with him a little bit, but it's not something he does. Actually, I just hiked with him to because they got all the rain down there. They've got some waterfalls close to his house. It's amazing. It's that close to LA. But in general, I mean, he's not signing up for big backpacking trips. That's just not his jam. So
yeah. Do you feel like, and that's kind of a perfect, I was thinking this for myself. I live like in the suburbs of Minneapolis, so there's not really a lot of nature near. There's little pockets where you can kind of feel like you've disappeared into the wilderness a bit, but you're really just off of the highway, you know? But I have a girlfriend she's in the cities, but she still like goes biking and, you know, she still has like found ways where she's outdoors, even though she's in the midst of the city. Do you feel like, is your son still kind of that way or no?
he actually is. I think I'm going to end up sending that Comfort Crisis book to both the boys, but you know, he sends pictures all the time. He lives like around the corner from Echo Park, which is a little kind of oasis in the middle of LA. And they've got a pond there and fountains and walks and grass and trees and flowers and stuff like that. So he sends pics all the time. He's walking there. And that's, you know, when he says, if he texts saying, I'm not feeling, you know, I'm feeling down or something, I was like, head outside, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then, you know, a short drive, you get into the canyons and you know, there's a lot of people on the trails because it's LA, but you're out in the wild. I mean, we got our feet wet crossing a river.
Yeah.
So
That's
you
what,
can do it. Yeah.
yeah, I've heard that about LA. Oop, I've heard that about LA and we have family in California, so we've done a few hikes in the area. Um, but I think that's kind of amazing. And I think for myself, I know, like I said, being in the suburbs, I almost would kind of throw myself a pity party for a while when we started being outdoors more. Up north, northern Minnesota has beautiful trails and lots
Oh,
of
yeah.
water. But then coming home, like, I don't want to go for a walk around the block. Like, ugh, what is there to look at here? This is stupid, perfectly planted trees, and I don't staring at my neighbors' houses. I kind of had like a negative mentality about it. Like, because this isn't beautiful, wonderful nature, there's no waterfall, there's no hike for me to accomplish. What's the point? Um, and in the last few years, I kind of told myself, just shut up and just go outside. And it's not the same, but I truly feel the benefits, probably like you were saying with the comfort crisis, like the 20 minutes outside per day. There's a huge difference that happens.
Yeah. It still has value. Just in particular, they did this study of people that live in a city and going into a park. And the key was you have to leave your phone at home or turn it off. And and there's something magic. So you're not listening to anything. There's something magic about your body's moving. You know, you've still got the sun, the breeze, the flowers, trees, even if they are planted in a perfect straight row and the lawn is mowed. Um, and the activity is enough to kind of distract your mind, but not enough that you have to focus on it. And so it allows your mind to wander. And our our minds are under such constant stimulus and bombardment in our usual life that you know it's not good for our health and it's really not good for creativity. And they've got some fascinating studies in that book how just allowing your 20 minutes outside walking around the neighborhood allows your mind to slip into the kind of that soft focus and gives you time like creativity. I mean, you probably come up with ideas for your podcast or people you should reach out to or you know, maybe things you need to get at the store or whatever. I don't know, dinner ideas. But, you know, it allows kind of that creativity and that unplugging that is so lacking in our daily lives.
It absolutely does. And I've made it part of my routine, 20-minute minimum outdoor walk a day. And thankfully, I have a big dog, so he's happy to give me reason. I swear he can smell when he knows I want to walk or something, because I'll go at different times throughout the day. So there's no routine time that he knows. but it's like I put on my socks a different way when I'm going on a walk because he just immediately knows. Um, but I do struggle with I always like, oh, I should put a podcast on or I should listen to music. Uh, and that's something I've worked at not doing as often. Um, because I think you're right. So much of our daily life is busy. And then maybe it's more so when I first started the habit of walking, I felt like I have to make this time productive. I have to make this something. It can't
Yeah.
just be a walk, you know?
That's so, I'm like the same way. When I was building my career and everything, it's like trying to use every minute. And so back then it was like cassette tapes. If I was driving, I was listening to something about how to be a better engineer, how to be a better businessman, or how to negotiate better. Probably should have been listening to things about how to be a better dad and father. But, um, now it's such a luxury not to have anything in and just to let your mind wander. And like you, I have that trap like, oh, I should be productive, but not realizing that actually the silence is the most productive you can be. And there's a fascinating thing in the comfort crisis on boredom and how we vanquish boredom and we how we need to be okay with being bored because that's the gateway to creativity. Then we start thinking about things and wondering about being curious and noticing things, even if you're walking around the neighborhood, noticing things about people's houses or, when you're walking around, you can notice other people. If I'm not busy, wound up in my own to-do list, I can notice someone else and go, hey, what's going on with you? Get to know other people.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's what uh I've said that before. I'll share like, like most moms, I suppose, or I have my own little Facebook, like my Facebook, which to me is when I have like a social media presence, it's nice to have just the people who know me in real life. But I would always share because I homeschooled my kids for the first 5-ish years of elementary school. And one of the things I always said was I would take pictures of what my kids had done and say, reminder, let your kids be bored. Because the things that they would come up with were so cool. Like they build their own time machines. I still remember I hadn't gotten out of bed one day and my son was 4. He came up, he had built like a Ghostbuster full on backpack out of like a shoebox. He took Dixie cups and put it on the side with a toilet paper roll attached. So he had a little like the like proton fire thing. It was just so cool.
Yeah, you know, it's, we had so little in the way of like organized toys, nothing digital, obviously. And yeah, kids can make anything out of a cardboard box. Our youngest son, Grant, string and tape. You could give him a ball of string and a thing of scotch tape, and he'd be busy for days. And we still have, like, occasionally you turn over the back of a chair or something. It's like, there's a little bit of scotch tape and some string. So yeah, kids can figure stuff out, and I think we lose that when we're older. We constantly need to amuse ourselves listening to something or watching something.
Right.
I'm very happy just sitting. It drives my wife crazy because we often travel, take long road trips. We might be driving 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And I'm happy just inside my own head. And she tells the story sometimes of like, once I was mad. She's, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to wait and see how long it is before Glenn says something. And she waited a very long time.
I was gonna say, oh, that's what I'm definitely the talker, where I think my husband could happily sit in silence, but it's been, and I wonder if you have experienced this in your lives as well, is like um an intentional slowdown for me. Because like I said, I have that need to always have to be productive, always, even relaxing time, I should be doing something. So I've had to work to just let myself be when I'm reading a book. And sometimes I'm reading and I think, oh, I should look this up on my phone. When you read a little snippet, you want to look up something on phone, then it's so quick to get lost down like a social media rabbit hole or something. And instead I just have like worked to, nope, I'm not looking it up, or I'll maybe make a note in a notebook. I'll write it down in a notebook. And the more I did that, the more it rubbed off on him. He used to be the kind of person that was like mowing the lawn multiple times a week, wanting to always have a project, something. And now he's like, I just want to read. I just want to sit with a book and turn on my, like, light a candle, and have those moments, where you can kind of just be.
Well, that's one of the reasons we like road trips is it kind of enforces that.
Yeah.
Road trips is one because you can't do anything. I do all the driving, so I'm literally just driving. Um, and it's fun because it's time with Francie, and she's not a big like, hey, let's go sleep in the dirt tonight kind of gal. So I mean, she's done it, but it's not her happy place. Um, and so it's time together, kind of enforced time together, and we can't a lot of times we can't be on any phones or anything. Sometimes we listen to books on tape, but we listen to them together. And sometimes she will go buy something and go, gosh, I wonder what that's about. And, she'll check it out and say, well, let me tell you what I've learned. And, I don't know, we were driving through New York State once and she says, oh, we're not far from Leroy, New York, and there's a Jello museum there, like the Jello museum. So we have to go there, and we went there, and it was amazing. And those are the things you don't like. No one, I'm pretty sure that doesn't show up on like things you have to see before you die or any list that you would come across on social media. It's just when you're driving, and backpacking is another great opportunity of kind of enforced boredom, as it were, getting away from being busy because all you have to do is walk. You have no cell service. You can't do anything on any to do list. The only thing you need to think about are where's the next water and where am I going to stay the night? Where am I camping tonight? And if you're hiking with other people, I do a lot of hikes with John Mackey and his band of friends, and a lot of those in Europe are more hut hikes. So you're not carrying all your gear and you're sleeping in a bed at night, but generally you're walking all day. And so based on your pace and everything, you find yourself walking alongside someone that you maybe didn't know before the trip or didn't know very well. And you get to talking about something. And, a lot of times they'll say, you'll ask them something, they say, well, it's a long story. And you go, well, we're going to be walking for the next 8 hours. So launch in. You've got that time that we don't have in normal life. Even if you meet someone for coffee, it's like, yeah. Okay. Well, that's been great. It's been a half hour, an hour. I got to go. I got to go to the next thing, pick the kids up or go shopping or whatever. You just don't have that uninterrupted time with people to really dive in. I'm guessing that, people that do through hiking, they oftentimes end up with kind of trail family, people that have similar paces and you end up kind of camping in the same place. And I bet there's things that they know about their trail family that nobody else does, because nobody else has spent 4 to 6 months every day with them.
Oh, you're probably right. And when you say that, it reminds me of, so I told you, as my kids have gotten older, they don't like the longer hikes as much. My son kind of does it contently, but he says he doesn't like it, but he just is like miles ahead of everyone, just having a go. Where my daughter's like, how many times can I complain about this as we go? But one thing I've noticed, and this is great for, any parents listening or people with younger kids, we obviously don't do like the long 8-hour hikes necessarily, or we're not camping um with them. I should tell you, we did camp out of our minivan when COVID hit. We took our minivan and started sleeping and hiking, and it was some of the
Nice.
best times of our life.
Yeah.
Uh, but my daughter will talk like crazy on a hike. If you just kind of start talking to her, and I feel like we've had so many really great conversations um whenever we're hiking, and that's one thing I remember. Like, oh, if I start talking to her, she's more distracted. She's not so focused on the hike and if she's tired or her feet hurt. But also like we get this amazing mother-daughter connecting time. Um
Yeah, it's that
It's
time away
yeah,
from distractions. You don't have the to-do lists, you don't have the social media. There's nothing but you and your daughter, and you get to connect. It's
yeah.
fun when you get to connect with kids. Francie, just my wife, just reminded me of this the other day. Um, this was when our son Grant was younger, well, maybe high school age or maybe college. Must have been high school because he was home. And we always told him, hey, no questions asked. If you are out drinking and you don't feel you can drive, just call anytime, day or night. Happy to come pick you up. So anyway, I go to bed early, about midnight, get a call. Hey, Dad, or I don't know, Francie probably answered. I was probably dead asleep. Anyway, go down to pick him up, and he wanted to know, can we give this, some friend of his, gal he met, a ride home? And so she's not clearly didn't have as much to drink as Grant had, but so she's trying to give me directions in Carlsbad to get to her house, and Grant, being drunk, is going on. He says, "My dad, he's a civil engineer. He knows all the streets. He's really smart. He had to take like a 16-hour exam, and he passed it the first time. And he's really smart." And it was just so cute because like they would never tell you that to your face, but when the barriers are lessened either through alcohol in this case, or
Yeah.
long hikes in your case, you get to get below the surface and get to another level with your kids, which is
Oh,
precious.
that's funny. I was wondering, I'm like, oh, but yeah, you're right. That's probably the moments where you're like, that's really what you think of me. What a great little glimpse, you know?
Yeah.
Um, oh, that's so cool. And so I feel like we haven't talked too much on your book. Um, I think all this probably a little bit aligns with what your book is about, but do you want to, it's called Take Less, Do More. Do you want to kind of share? I know you did a little bit that it's not all about packing light necessarily. Um, but kind of how you came up with the concept or why people were nudging you toward this type of book.
Well, John Mackey wanted me to write a book, I think, focused on ultralight backpacking, and I always resisted because there's plenty of great books out there already. I don't really think I need to add my 2 cents to the mix. But then I started to think there were a couple things. I started to think about, the other things I learned, and as you pointed out, kind of the other lessons of minimalism was like, sure, it's nice to have a clean closet, but that's not really the big benefit. That's a side benefit. Um, and so through lightening my pack and taking trips in the outside, the lessons I learned, I mean, many of them apply to the rest of life. Um, one is creating margin in your life. If you, it's great having a lighter pack because you can go further, you can do more things, you're more engaged. You're not thinking about how miserable you are because of your heavy pack, and you get to be more curious and engage with other people and engage with the trail and the wilderness. But also, you're creating margin. I have a picture of me carrying 2 packs because we were in Buckskin Gulch and Francie's arthritis was acting up. And because I pack light, of course. That's kind of my deal. And because she's married to me, she was packed light. I was able to put her pack on my front and my pack on my back. And I was probably still carrying less weight than some of the people we came across. And so in life, in the wilderness, if you have margin because you're packing less, maybe you need to run on ahead, or you need to take someone else's gear or help distribute their load because they're injured, and you have the capability to do that. And in life, if we've created margin, either I talk about creating a separate fund, we take a separate percentage of all income and it goes into a separate account. And this is like our gratitude account or tithing account, that so when needs come across, we have built that margin in that we can help those. Um, Part of it is time. You talked about our tendency to overschedule. I know I'm terrible at that. Um, but if we create time in our life, then we have time to impact other people's lives. And then energy, if we're constantly like wound up in our to-do lists and things we need to do and things we need to do for our kids and stuff, and we don't have the bandwidth to notice other people, is like, yeah, I should probably call so and so and make sure they're okay, but I don't really have time. Um, so creating that margin in life is something that is so valuable in life as well as when you're in the wilderness.
Yeah. Oh, I totally get that. I love that. That's such an interesting concept and way of putting it out. Um, and that's what I recently, when I was sick, I was like, well, I'm just gonna make a whole bunch of like little social media videos. I'll do short little videos that I try to do like a positive message with them. But I did one that said 10 years ago, I decluttered my stuff so that one day I could show up for my daughter when she was sick. I got sick because I took care of my daughter being sick. Um, but people said, I don't understand how decluttering helped you be there for your daughter. I would be there for my kids no matter what. The people we don't always necessarily see, or we don't bridge the gap between less, like you said, packing lighter for yourself and for your wife allowed you that space to be there for her, and to help carry some of her load, like literally help her carry her load through the rest of the trail. um there really is so much correlation, I think, between, um decide for me, it's been a lot of intentionally choosing, and I'm sure this goes hand in hand with packing as well, as what don't I need to bring along so that I can, do more of what I want to do? What can I let go of so that I can go faster, I can go easier, I can go, you know, more in the direction I want to be going in, type of thing.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine, Ryan Jordan, the other day, and he was talking about when he first got married. They were living in like a tiny, I don't know, 300 or 400 square foot apartment. They had nothing. And he says, that was like the happiest times of our lives. You didn't, decisions were easy. We're going to have steak for dinner. Nope. Are we going to buy a car? Nope. When you have no money, it's like a lot of decisions are very easy. Um, and so I think there's a emotional cost, there's a physical cost with stuff. Um, you buying it, but even if you can afford it, I always say that, there wouldn't be enough evidence to convict me of being a minimalist if you met me at my house. On the trail, for sure. That I'm there. But I think part of it is not how much stuff you have necessarily, although that's a factor, but do you own the stuff or does the stuff own you?
Right.
We have a Sprinter van, Winnebago Revel, adventure van. And people are amazed that we lend it out to people. They go, that's like $150,000 investment. What if they screw it up? It's like, it's just stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
it's just stuff. And so I think you can be kind of mentally a minimalist, even if you have a lot of stuff. Um, if you're holding it lightly. Um, I don't know. I don't know if that
Oh,
makes sense.
no, that perfectly makes sense, because I sometimes, because people love to complain, especially on the internet. Some people say, like, you can't be a minimalist. Look at, you've got stuff on your nightstand. I'm like, I have a book and a picture of my grandmother. Like, come on, but it's been a part for me. It was bringing things back in. Kind of, there was a time where I needed to lighten how much I had. I needed to create space. And then a time where I was going, I want to intentionally fill my space. But you're right, not be so attached to what I'm bringing in. Um, and I love that you do that with the van. This is a conversation I had recently. Our oldest daughter is currently in med school, and so on occasion she will house sit for doctors. And there's one particular family that she's been house sitting for a lot. Um, he and his wife have been traveling, and so they dog sit slash house sit. But she'll sometimes we'll go visit and we'll stay at the house. It's right on Lake Superior. It's really beautiful. They have like a sauna, they have a hot tub. Um, and she'll say, "Oh, by the way, the soccer team a soccer team might show up. He told them that they could come and hang out in the hot tub, because, and I love that about this doctor who I've never met, but the idea of, well, if I have this space, I may as well share it. So he'll meet someone on the beach and say, oh, if you guys want to come up and take advantage of this and use this to just complete strangers that he doesn't know. Um, and it's like, wow, I really want to be that kind of person. If I get to that point in my life where I have expensive, high quality, good things, I don't really have the most expensive of things in my life at this point. But if I ever do, I still want that level of detachment from them that they're here to share.
Yeah, I don't want to own a fancy enough car that I wouldn't lend to someone.
Right.
It's like, because what's the point?
Oh, that is so amazing. And if you ever want to give me your van, let me know. That sounds fantastic. But thank you so much for this. Where can people get your book?
Well, they can pre-order it before April 16th. It launches April 16th at Amazon or anywhere books are sold online. They can also get it at gossamergear.com. That's the gear company I accidentally founded. Or your local bookstore. If you want to support them, they can certainly order it.
Yeah, and then so you guys can grab the book in the show notes.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, Glenn. This was amazing.
Thank you. I'm glad you're feeling better, and it was a treat.